Hi, welcome to your weekly energy report for the week of the 18th of October through the 25th of October, something like that, 2020. I tried recording this last night, but, well, this entire week has felt sort of bizarrely outside of time and space. And so while that's not necessarily an unpleasant thing, on the contrary, it's actually very liberating, it's not exactly great for gauging energy because in terms of the retrogrades that we're undergoing still, particularly Mercury that went retrograde last week. We did not talk about that last week because I didn't want to focus all of our energy on the idea of another Mercury retrograde, but we will talk about it now. All of those energies have basically put us in this place where it's no longer about being in a pressure cooker, it's about being in those final stages of the chrysalis. And you can imagine that if whatever is in the chrysalis has consciousness and self-awareness, that those moments before breaking out must be rather disorienting and perhaps even frustrating at times, right? So, Mercury retrograde, as we know, Mercury is retrograding between Scorpio and Libra. And to me, this is a closure on the cycle of Mercury retrogrades that began in March of last year. They've all been in water signs. That's the reason why I say that. And this will be the last of this cycle of water sign retrogrades. And that's a lot of water, emotions. That's a lot of deep diving into the subconscious mind in order to heal the inner child, heal the aspects of ourselves that we have, our shadow selves, the things that we've refuted and filed away subconsciously in order to not be defined by things that get in the way of us belonging and making ourselves fit into other people's cultures, other people's systemic views. And of course, we accept that as a social contract, that we have to give away enormous parts of ourselves when we're very young in order to conform, in order to belong. These things are, we go through such peer pressure and of course the educational process from our parents, from our educational systems, and they shape us away from our natural flow very often. And there's no use blaming anybody for that, because the reality is that that's just a system that everybody conforms to. The exceptions to that perhaps exist, but they're not in the majority. And so we then spend years and years, decades, in many people's cases, unraveling, fighting an invisible enemy, until the purge comes about. And there has been this massive collective purge. We're all at different levels of self-awareness and consciousness when it comes to our what drives our frustrations and our limitations. But I think we can all agree that this last year and a half has been revolutionary in terms of coming to a better understanding of who we really are, who we want to become. And the truth is, way more simple than perhaps we have given ourselves permission to accept, which is that, when we've defined ourselves by our poverty consciousness our whole lives, that it's like, this happened to me, that happened to me, this is my trauma, this is my pain, this is my anxiety, this is the source of my suffering, that obviously colors all of the experiences that you have, and generally that becomes more and more the case the older you get, or that has traditionally been the case in our society. But now that all of that is going to shit and everybody's starting to slowly see through the veil and starting to actually understand just how gaslit they've been and just how manipulated they have been and just how distorted we've all become, there's been a lot of inner work to do. And we've done it. But, as with everything, I hate to get really graphic about these things because it's disgusting, but, if you've ever had a boil or a zit, one of those really painful large ones, it's right before it's ready to pop. It is excruciatingly painful. It's like throbbing pain. You feel it, right? We've all had them. Well, that's kind of where we are right now. And our reading really reflects that. In a couple of weeks' time, a lot of this energy is going to shift entirely because we already have quite a few of the major retrogrades having come to an end, but by mid-November, all of them will have come to an end. All of these really intense retrogrades. Who knows what that's going to bring to us? And that's a lot of what we're experiencing right now, isn't it? Is that we don't know. We know that there's massive changes. We know that things have really shifted. But we can't really imagine how that's going to manifest and how that will translate into reality as we see it. Okay, so to give you some context of the reading, of course I took our 3 oracle cards. I did a Celtic cross this week, and I took clarifiers not only from our Rider-Waite tarot deck, but also I took just two clarifiers for the underlying energy and for the outcome from the Zen Osho tarot deck. And we will read into those messages more in more detail if we have time. So I think that's all I have to say in terms of, of course, we could talk about the astrology endlessly, but the reality is that we are, we're kind of in the eye of the storm right now. So let's just take advantage of that. It's not so much inertia, but the stillness. And I know that for many of you, that stillness is literal right now. So hang in there. It will all eventually shift. I promise you that. Our spirit animal oracle card of the week is Koi Fish Spirit. There is always enough. And I will preface before I read the oracle message that our entire reading is about poverty consciousness, about what tricks us back into falling into poverty consciousness, and perhaps also we'll discover how we finally transcend this, and it's about transcendence of that. And it's funny because, you know, we've talked so much about poverty consciousness in all of our readings. And we are coming to a place where, again, like the hideous analogy I gave of the zit or the boil, you know, poverty consciousness is so pernicious that, you know, we don't know when we're experiencing it. And I'm going to say something right now because I'm very acutely self-aware when it comes to language. I have a horrible tendency to use certain things in speech when I'm doing these videos that are some kind of remnant of peer pressure from when I was much younger. I will use the term "you know" a lot. You probably noticed that. It's almost like a tick. It's just like, there's three. You know, and whatever the last one was that I just did, like. These are Americanisms that, because I wasn't born American, I grew up with a very, very different speech pattern and culture. So by conformism, I adopted what probably seemed cool to me at some point in my life, but obviously when I watch my videos sometimes, because there are, you know, sometimes it's hard for me to remember that these messages are for me too, not just for everyone else. So I go back and watch them to see what I'm actually saying, because a lot of the time I'm not that self-aware while I'm doing these readings. And I'm horrified by how many times I sometimes say, you know. So I'm also trying to move beyond that, because I believe the reason I'm speaking about it is because that's a form of poverty consciousness. It's when we don't trust our words, our expression, we fall into those types of speech patterns. I think we were all taught the same thing about swearing. People that do not know how to use language fall back on swearing. Of course, some of us, like me, also fell back into swearing because it was an act of rebellion. And as we've discussed, this also ties into poverty consciousness. And I'm expressing this because we all have different habits. These are my habits. They're verbal. For some other people, it's eating, it's picking their nose, it's picking scabs, it's eating their eye boogers. I'm just trying to gross you all out. But when we become, you know, enacting those things is a form of poverty consciousness. Again, you have to think about that and figure out why that's poverty consciousness for you. But I have my theories. But I'm not you, and I'm not in your life. I only know it for myself. But all of those things, you know, peer pressure, wanting to conform to lesser expressions of self in order to fit in, of course that's a form of poverty consciousness, and it's trauma programming, it's all of the things that we've already talked about thus far, 14 minutes in. So let me just read this oracle message so that I don't talk your ears off. Koi fish spirit, there is always enough. The oracle message is, the koi fish who grows big within a small pond reminds us that within each of us is the potential for prosperity. The law of abundance ensures that the prosperity is our natural state. So regardless of temporary outer conditions, you can call in prosperity and magnetically attract the opportunities and abundance you need. The message of koi fish spirit is to begin to generate wealth within with deliberate intention, no matter how small your pond may seem, and appreciate abundance wherever you see it. outer conditions will come to reflect your inner prosperity. So begin to become the self who is comfortable with wealth in all forms. Even if at the moment it feels as if riches are not yours, they soon will be. Start to envision the plenty that Spirit wants you to experience, knowing that the moment you begin to commit to conscious and deliberate co-creating, Spirit will joyfully start bringing you what you need. You have so much to offer and so much value to express to the world. In your little pond, there is much you can create and much you can attract. Do not underestimate what you have and who you are, for Koi Fish Spirit wants you to know that you are exquisite, loved, and deeply cherished. Trust that outer conditions are changing to reflect that truth. And this is all the work that we've been doing, right? For the last month, especially. We've talked about this process of coming into flow with ourselves allows us to flow better with our environment. We're not activated and triggered by other people's behaviors, knowing that when we do have an egoic response to them, it is simply the expression of an unresolved part of our shadow self. The ego, whatever you want to call it, is lurking to make everything into a disaster, which is self-sabotage. And as soon as we transcend that reality, we co-create with our world in ways that are conducive with elevation of the frequency, the vibrational flow, and we become in harmony with the people that we communicate with, whether that be at work or in our families or with our friends or just with anybody that we encounter in everyday life, including those that we don't actually have direct communication with. It could be the way, if you're a person that watches the news or television, then you may find that a lot of the time your inner monologue is directed at people that don't actually hear or register anything that you're thinking or feeling, but you're still playing out that narrative, right? So it's interesting to be self-aware in that way about how we can change our interaction with other people, and to know that as much as it's triggering to realize that we create those things, it's also deeply empowering to understand that we have the power to change it by changing ourselves, and that's really all there is to it. Oh, it's very annoying though, right? Because we have all those experiences of our past stored away, reminding us of exactly why we need to show the world how it should function and how it should behave towards us and accommodate our needs. But that's not the way the world works. And if you want inner peace and harmony, right? Interestingly, our other two oracle cards were security and round, which is the card of life is a circle. And security, I will read the message, but again, all of this comes down to, Koi Fish Spirit telling us that there's always enough for us. Security reminding us that, when we step outside of poverty consciousness, when we step outside of being triggered, of being volatile in our environment, and therefore ensconced in chaos as opposed to harmony and self-created order, that is, it is, again, nothing but a self-fulfilling prophecy. The security is always there for us. I can speak from my own perspective that, for me, for example, because for whatever reason, the way that I grew up and the way that I interacted in my environment, the feeling of being restricted by anger, violence, judgment in my childhood and adolescence, the things that prevented me from being able to express myself openly, to be accepted, whether that was because I identified as being gay, like at a time in the world where that just wasn't something that anybody was able to be openly in, a high school or primary school or any level of when you're a minor. All of those frustrations of not being able to express authentically who I was, and actually to be curbed and punished in many ways as a result of that by society at large and in my microcosmic environment, that caused me to, my shadow self, my inner child, basically took all of this on and hid it away, well, if you conform and if you act this way and if you just do things that make people think that you're cool and that you're, or that you're living up to their expectations, then you will be able to survive. So as a result of that, I spent my entire life in survival mode. Never thriving, always in survival mode. It took an enormous amount of harmonious qualities in my environment for me to ever feel as though I was thriving. And there was always an acute understanding for me that it was temporary and that eventually chaos would ensue and it would all fall apart. And usually as a result of some kind of antagonism, some kind of boundary not being respected, some kind of explosive reinforcement that served absolutely no one, but least of all myself. And we all have those. So to come to the understanding that by giving yourself permission to be yourself, but also understanding that you have to give that permission to everybody else as an adult. Obviously, when I'm talking about that trauma, I had no choice because I was not able to take care of myself or be responsible for myself. But once you become an adult, normally you, in a healthy person, a healthy psychology, you would move beyond that, right? And you would understand that you can have healthy relationships with other people, that you can be respected and in turn respect other people and not feel that who they are or what they're doing is some kind of an infringement upon your own freedom. So anyway, I'm explaining a lot of things that perhaps are very personal, but hopefully you can see how they contextualize and apply to your own situations. Because it's always relatable, right? And in terms of security and the idea of there being, bountifulness, the idea of this reading seems to really be about how we have that within ourselves, and spirituality, of course, is the ultimate pathway to accessing that sense of sovereignty. What does security tell us exactly? Let's just see. Okay. The message of the sacred landscape of security is that you are safe and protected. No matter what is occurring in your life, you are in safe hands. Those in the realm of spirit are watching over you. You can relax and let go. Once you've taken measures to protect yourself and those you love, such as making sure everyone has their seatbelt on in the car, making sure your insurance is paid on time, or replacing the filter on your heating unit, then let go. If you have been hypervigilant lately, controlling in other words, take a break. Relax. Know that all is well. You can turn it all over to the Creator. And can you trust that? Again, if you're not trusting it, then that's that you're in poverty consciousness and that you don't understand that there's always enough for everyone. And, what do we get as our sort of exclamation mark on the oracle messages, we get the round and round card, which is the idea of the cycle. And if we look at what the oracle essential meaning of round and round is, it's that the spiral quality of events, this is the spiral quality of events when a lesson isn't quite integrated. Cycles you are challenged to break, revisiting a pattern from a new perspective. So that's exactly what this reading is all about, and it's exactly what our entire experience right now is all about. It's, you know, if you're still feeling things that are not comfortable to you, that is the universe giving you the opportunity to focus on what your mirror image is, and understanding that we, you know, repeat these, you know, until we purge these poverty consciousness patterns entirely. Of course, we will perpetually find ourselves re-experiencing triggers of that sense of lack. The mastery of it is in Zen Buddhism. You know, if you haven't had, you know, we all pick and choose what we want from different spiritual practices, but you know, if you look into a lot of the Bodhisattva, like just different spiritual Buddhist practices, all of them come down to self-driven transcendence of the ego. And that is about understanding that our insecurity and our sense of lack comes from within. It's not about other people. So, I mean, I can't really get more broad than that, right? Interestingly, an underlying message of the week is the Queen of Wands. So maybe this is actually where our poverty consciousness is manifesting. The Queen of Wands is the epitome of self-confidence, somebody who knows her self-worth, who knows how to put her divine, inspired inner self in a position to give and receive. It's, you know, the feline nature of I mean, in a sacred sense. I mean, if you're looking at a cat, they're hardly likely to give you like a strong sense of giving and receiving, because they're petulant little beasts that we love very much, but at the same time, let's be honest, that's not what we're talking about here. But it is, you know, the fertility that comes from being in this space of openness can't exist when we're stuck in the remnants of poverty consciousness in our lives. And, you know, there I go with the you-knows. The Osho Zen card that we got is Thunderbolt, which is the tower in reverse, I will add. But I'm sorry, I didn't look up the card in advance, so I need to find it. Here it is. And I'm going to read the message, even though we got it reversed, because essentially what the message tells us as it is, oppose all of it, think about what it is, and then realize that that's what this week ahead is all about. It's ending the tower energy that we've carried with us, because Towers that are not integrated become trauma. So let's see. What meditation does slowly, a good shout of the master unexpectedly in the situation where the disciple was asking some question, and the master jumps and shouts, or hits him, or throws him out at the door, or jumps over him. These methods were never known. It was purely the very creative genius of Ma Tzu, and he made many people enlightened. Sometimes it looks so hilarious. He threw a man from the window from a 2-story house, and the man had come to ask on what to meditate. And Ma Tzu not only threw him, he jumped after him, fell on him, sat on his chest, and he said, "Got it?" And the poor fellow said, "Yes, because if you say no, he may beat you or do something else. It is enough. His body is fractured," and Ma Tzu, sitting on his chest, says, "Got it?" And in fact, he got it, because it was so sudden, out of the blue, he could never have conceived it. The card shows a tower being burned, destroyed, blown apart. A man and a woman are leaping from it, not because they want to, but because they have no choice. In the background is a transparent meditating figure representing the witnessing consciousness. You might be feeling pretty shaky right now, as if the earth is rocking beneath your feet. Your sense of security is being challenged, and the natural tendency to try to hold on to whatever you can. The natural tendency is to try to hold on to whatever you can, But this inner earthquake is both necessary and tremendously important. If you allow it, you will emerge from the wreckage stronger and more available for new experiences. After the fire, the earth is replenished. After the storm, the air is clear. Try to watch the destruction with detachment, almost as if it were happening to somebody else. Say yes to the process by meeting it halfway. So the fact that we end on the idea of meeting it halfway, whether it's reversed or upright, is still the same. It's just coming from a different angle. We're not in tower energy any longer. There are no more towers when you are self-aware and when you are aiming for harmony. Because any experience that we have is received as holy, as holy. If you're a religious person, sure, that wasn't what I was meaning, as fully in alignment with the universe's message for your life. So if something needs to go, or if something needs to change, then we just kind of have to accept that, right? We don't have to, we just do accept it, because that's the very essence and nature of our human experience. It's not to hold on. It's not to stay the same. That is not the journey of the enlightened person. You have to have new experiences. You have to have new dynamics. You have to have new lessons to learn. You can't shut yourself in your ivory tower or your castle, your tower, expecting everything to stay the same, expecting to stay in that Four of Pentacles energy of the miser holding on to the little that he has for fear of losing that, but missing out on all the opportunities for more prosperity, right? So no matter which way we look at it, it seems that the universe is telling us that we're not going to get to do that anymore. But integrating it with the Queen of Wands message, we are also being given the opportunity to re-dynamize ourselves and to reignite that inner fire in a more externalized process. Now, at the center of our reading, we got Temperance. So again, all of the energies right now, a big part of this last period of winning over our poverty consciousness is based on the idea of balance that we talked about a lot last week, I believe. I think it was last week. So it's nice that that's moved into our present, because it means that we actually have been doing the work that we needed to do in order to get to this place in our present. The challenge to that is the Nine of Wands, which, I mean, the image does speak for itself, of course, but at the same time, this weariness is, gets in our way. If we're not in flow, if we're, feeling run down, if we're feeling bogged down, if we're feeling restricted by our environment, by our duties, rather than finding the flow of discipline that is self-administered in everything that we do, then we can't be in temperance. We find ourselves, swinging to either side of the pendulum spectrum. So, the goal, of course, is to temper that slowly, so that maybe we've been going like this. I'm just doing that so that I can make this strange movement with my arms on camera, to, maybe just being a little bit more like this, and eventually centering ourselves in everything that we experience. And I know it's easier said than done, but we've been doing a lot of work on this for a long time, so this is not going to be a brand new concept to you. It's something that we're acutely aware of, and that sometimes maybe we find ourselves in avoidance of too, because it can feel a lot more comforting to stay in the unresolved space of things that we are still that we're more familiar with, right? Of course, the shadow self is a part of ourselves that we're quite familiar with in a strange way, because as much as we're not consciously aware of the things that we've boxed away in our shadow self, we're also acutely aware that it exists, and it's like a pet. We kind of nurture it in a strangely distant way. Anyway, I digress a little bit, but hopefully that made some sense to you. Now, what we're seeing is that, and this was also in our past reading, like a week or two ago, the Knight of Pentacles has now moved into our past energy. Now, this was an opportunity to bring something of our wealth on the inside, of all the work that we've been doing, into the outside world in some kind of manifested, disciplined, but relatively strong manner. And it came with these two cards. So, this is, we talked about the mirrors in our lives, and the opportunity offered to us from the universe to open ourselves up to this dynamic with others in our world, having new people coming into our environment, perhaps. And then we move into our recent past underlying energy, and we get these two fucked up cards. The Five of Cups and the Knight of Cups reversed. So that's self-sabotage. That's having this energy, and the poverty consciousness monster started telling us that it wasn't right for us, it wasn't good enough for us, it didn't fit our, we wanted these 3 cups, not these 2 here, and we're gonna put the stopper in and prevent that flow because of self-doubt and not being in alignment with the universe, to accept that if it came our way, it was because it was divinely purposed. And I know that in my life I've felt that with a couple of experiences where, like the flow was strong and bountiful and full of potential. And then not just me, but the other person, like in these cases in my life, we somehow did not manage to solidify the opportunity. That's not to say that it won't happen, and it's just that it's part of these energies right now to like go immediately into self-doubt, and as we move into our immediate future energies, this dichotomy, the devil, that's the codependency, that's the addictions, it's the shadow self ruling the roost. And it's what's so, I guess, exasperating but funny about seeing it in our immediate future is that, what this really is saying is that you can't hide from knowing that this is a part of who you are anymore, And it's like if we are still choosing to stay in this energy rather than being in this energy, where this is the opposite of poverty consciousness. This is the sense of Libran balance, of having enough for ourselves to be generous, to be interconnected with all living beings, to see ourselves as part of a flow energetically with everyone and everything. This is the complete opposite of that. This is the ego going, no, I am special or I'm not special enough. Either way, they come to the same place where you're self-obsessed, you're focused on how your needs have not been met, will never be met. And so, right? I'm closing myself off from everything. I'm going to go inside and have a fucked up relationship with myself instead of taking advantage of the opportunities to externalize these things, to actually put the time and effort into maintaining and developing pathways of support and interconnectedness and kindness and love, the whole curve, of our underlying reading from past into our immediate future is about the choice that we have to overcome our poverty consciousness. And of course, at the center of our reading was the Temperance card. So that's the only way that we can do it, is to temper it. And we temper it through mastery and discipline and effort. If you put all of your effort into one thing, like work or escapism, you're not going to get anywhere. You're going to stay in the cycle. And that's not a condemnation, because everything in life is a cycle. We can move beyond poverty consciousness. Our next step will be something else that we have to integrate from the shadow, or even as conscious, present beings. New circumstances will arise that will be challenging, and we'll create new challenges of cycles to move through. That's the very essence of everything about the energetic soul, like beyond our physical being, when we leave these bodies and, whatever process takes place beyond that, it's the same thing. It's a life cycle, like, what's more like a spiral, which is really what this represents, right? It's, it's not a downward spiral. We don't spiral down in life. We spiral up in the life cycle. Important to remember, because that may be part of what helps us to counter the poverty consciousness, is to remember that way beyond our own control, it's an upward spiral. We're moving evolutionarily forward, not backwards. And then our crowning energy is this. So this is, of course, the external poverty consciousness card. And it's like we're going to be given, it looks like we're going to be given an opportunity in the next week to 10 days, probably as a result of vanquishing this, of understanding that this is a call to arms to actually face this once and for all. No matter what you're doing this coming week, find where your poverty consciousness lies. Because if you can overcome this once and for all, you get this divine pentacle. Yes, the Knight of Pentacles carried that for us, but perhaps it was in too earthly a manner for us to understand the real opportunity in it. So this is saying that the universe steps in and says, take the fucking gift and stop this martyrdom, Like, look at all these pentacles here of protection, It's the tree of life here, It's a depiction of a church, but if you're not Christian, then you can disregard that and just see it as, a spiritual center of there always being enough. Security. And it's like, it's there. And if you're just gonna be these two ding-dongs, moving along oh, didn't see that. Oh God, there's somebody offering us all the things that we need. But we'll just keep walking and hobbling along as miserable people in the cold, hideous blizzard. No. You have this. And wouldn't you rather walk down this pathway? It's on offer in the near future. And, okay. So that's our inner world. Our outer world comes in this part of the cross. And I will try to speed this up so that this comes in under an hour. This is our present energy and our, how we are in the outside world. This is what the shadow self, inner child, is holding on to. And as soon as we let go of this, we're able to flow again. But what is standing in our way? The Page of Swords is the student. It's being receptive. It's being in a place of understanding that we know nothing. Every time you think you know something, it's a reminder of how that leads to an expression of all the things that you still don't know. It's infinite. You will never know everything, right? The more you know, the less you know. The more you know, the more aware you become of the infinite other pathways of expression and development and evolution. So, because this came reversed, this is our problem right now. We're not receptive to new ideas. We're stuck in our ways. We are carrying these swords around. This is well, you'll see, because it's funny, because in our environment, moving on to that, we have these two opposing forces. So it's there's this real, inner battle between these two realities. And who do you want to be? I mean, yes, this is the end of the cycle, but do you really have to feel like that? Do you really want to be defined by these? What did we say last week, and probably many other times? These are all thoughts. These are all thoughts and ideas. They're, it's this is what happens in trauma. And it's what happens to, in our shadows and to the inner child, is that you your inner defense mechanism interprets one traumatic situation as being a rule, and therefore when a thought becomes a rule, that limits your scope of evolutionary process, because it's a way of creating a sense of safety and security within you, to feel that you have a albeit an unpleasant boundary of knowledge that keeps you from having to encounter potentially worse. But of course, what you're really doing is you're preventing yourself from experiencing better. And as these came out together in our environment, this is how other people are towards us, and this is how we are towards other people. And it's, the Temperance card at the center of our reading is really about finding ways to make these 9 pentacles counter these 10 swords. Because this is an inner knowing of abundance, that there's always enough and that we are always secure and provided for by the universe when we're in flow and open. And it is a sad and almost tragic experience when you're stuck in that place, because there's, it's just a tiny, tiny little step in a different direction that can break down that illusion of being, of entrapment and restriction. And that's very topical for those of us that have restrictions of movement based upon the state of the world as it is right now. That it's as broad on that level as it is on our inner life level, right? Because we have to figure out how to transcend these limits and see them for what they are, and not empower them further to create more instability and more chaos and more frustration and more devil energy. It's like all those cliches, your body is a temple, your mind is a temple. They are. For you to worship yourself is the greatest act of love. Because then you can share that boundlessly, right? Interesting that our psychology card is a direct progression of that, because the Queen of Swords is an inner knowing and an inner authority. But unlike the King of Swords, who is sort of fixed in his self-knowledge, in the sense that it is then his role to direct and rule, the Queen of Swords is about giving of her knowledge and her intellect and her experiences. She's facing out. And she's facing away from the subconscious energy. And she has the rooting of earth elements to give her that strength to then take who she is and open it up to the world around her. And doing so in the sense of the lovers being the divine choice, the understanding that, we choose what we love. When you have that degree of knowledge and self-assuredness, it's then our duty as human beings to be in divine flow, to make choices that serve our higher selves. So all of that knowingness is there. all of that self-knowledge is there. It's time for you to start owning it, to be in Six of Pentacles energy and not avoiding it by being in the Devil energy. Our outcome is really beautiful because what awaits us at the end of this mini cycle is the definitive end to our scarcity dynamic, to our poverty consciousness. It's time for something absolutely brand new. And it comes with the Knight of Wands, the fastest moving card. This is moving through every barrier, every boundary, every restriction in inspired confidence and joy and playfulness again. That's also a part of this struggle, is that, you know, every time you fall more into the Devil energy, you may think that that's playful, but it's not at all. It's escapism. When you're a child and you're in the essence of playfulness, it's because you don't have to be in self-awareness. You know, that's the problem of the dynamic of disciplinarianism that comes from parental guides, in the sense that, you know, if you get the wrong kind of reinforcement, that, you know, if you do that, this is going to happen. Like, don't get too giddy, don't get too playful, don't break this, don't do that. You know, this puts an awareness in the child's mind, you know, that then becomes part of the shadow self, is the idea that something that's completely natural to them, that is the true beauty of childhood, has to be repressed in order to fit in, and in order to fit the needs of a parent or a guardian or a teacher or a school, some other institution. It's like, that is not the essence of humanity, and it's where the path is perverted. And that's also coming to an end. So can you be in that? And how do you get there? This again, and I'm not even going to read from the book on this one, because we've had it before. This is understanding that we have to let go of all of the prescribed standards that essentially add up to nothing but limitation. Whatever your thought process is that restricts you when you feel it, go blank. Do 3 minutes, 1 minute of meditation, if that's all you can do, in that moment, to clear your mind of whatever it is that is essentially just verbal diarrhea. It's not gonna like pull the rug out from under you. I'm not talking about like collapsing everything that's of structure in your life. I'm talking about your attitude towards it. So, those are the messages for this week. I hope they are helpful. I hope that you find a conscious flow in moving through these energies. I think that we're really getting good at this now. And I can just see us building, you know, and won't it be nice when we don't have to, I mean, we'll always have reminders because we're always going to be able to slip back into that poverty consciousness. But what we're doing is we're getting really good at acknowledging it and moving beyond it really quickly. So that's it. Love you. Wish you an amazing week. Namaste.